The Catholic tradition has long emphasized the importance of self-discipline, chastity, and the renunciation of worldly desires as a means of growing closer to God. One of the most profound yet often overlooked aspects of the spiritual struggle is the concept of semen retention, a form of bodily discipline that aligns with Catholic teachings on purity, self-mastery, and the redirection of energy toward higher spiritual pursuits. Throughout history, the Catholic tradition has been deeply entwined with ideas of purity, celibacy, and renunciation. From the early Desert Fathers to monastic orders and saintly ascetics, the Church has emphasized self-denial as a gateway to divine strength. One of the most radical and often misunderstood forms of renunciation in the spiritual path is the conservation of sexual energy, semen retention. Far from being a practice of repression, Catholic renunciation, especially in this context, points to a profound inner power rooted in spiritual discipline, divine union, and sacred purpose. The foundations of Catholic renunciation. Renunciation in Catholic thought is not mere rejection of worldly pleasures for their own sake. It is instead a conscious turning away from temporal attachments in favor of eternal truths. It finds its roots in the words of Christ. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Luke 9, verse 23. This renunciation encompasses many aspects: wealth, status, ego, comfort, and notably, sexual gratification. The Catholic Church does not view sex as evil. It is understood as a sacred act within the bounds of marriage. However, outside those bounds, and especially in the life of those called to higher vocations, priests, monks, nuns, celibacy becomes a sacred offering. It is a way of saying, my body belongs to God. My energy is not wasted. It is reserved for something eternal. In the context of semen retention, this renunciation becomes both physical and spiritual. It is a deliberate conservation of a man's most vital essence, channeling it not toward momentary pleasure, but toward communion with God. Catholicism has long understood that there is power in purity. The lives of celibate saints, from St. Francis of Assisi to St. John Vianney, demonstrate how the renunciation of sexual release can become a source of luminous strength. This is not a weakness or a denial of manhood, but rather perfection of it. Semen retention is not merely about abstaining from sex. It is about preserving and transmuting one's life force. The Church teaches that the body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19. If so, then the seed, potential life, held within a man is sacred. To waste it is to squander divine potential. To retain it is to guard the temple, to protect what is holy, and to redirect the energy toward spiritual works. Fathers of the Church often spoke of chastity as a fire that purifies. In the writings of St. Jerome, who fiercely battled temptation, the struggle for chastity was likened to warfare. It is in this struggle that the soul is forged. Semen retention becomes a training ground, where the man submits not to lust but to grace, and emerges not depleted but elevated. The priesthood offers perhaps the clearest institutional expression of this renunciation. Catholic priests are required to be celibate. This is not because the Church believes sex is sinful, but because celibacy allows the priest to devote himself fully to Christ and the Church. In remaining celibate, a priest embodies the image of Christ, who was celibate himself. The priest, in essence, becomes a bridegroom to the Church. This sacred role demands sacrifice, a continual offering of bodily desires on the altar of service. In this light, semen retention becomes not only a discipline, but a sacrament of sorts. It becomes a way of living out the death to self that Christ modeled. This renunciation is not without its trials. The priest is not a eunuch. He is a man with natural desires. But in offering those desires to God, he becomes a vessel of supernatural grace. He is empowered not in spite of his renunciation, but because of it. The early Christian monastics, especially the Desert Fathers of Egypt, Syria, and Palestine, are key figures in understanding the Catholic approach to renunciation. Men like St. Anthony the Great, who withdrew into the desert, saw the body as a battlefield where spiritual warfare took place. They believed that retaining one's vital energies, especially sexual energy, was critical in conquering the passions. St. John Cassian, whose writings influenced Western monasticism, emphasized vigilance against lust and the importance of purity. For the Desert Fathers, semen retention wasn't merely about avoiding sin. It was about spiritual fire. They believed that every drop retained fortified their soul, illuminating their mind in prayer and allowing greater intimacy with God. This idea of holy fire is echoed in many Catholic mystics. They believe that what the world calls weakness, refraining from sexual release, was, in fact, the source of supernatural clarity. The retention of sexual energy was a way of keeping the soul light, the spirit sensitive, and the heart wholly given to God. The modern church, especially through the writings of Pope John Paul II, emphasizes the theology of the body. While this theology explores the beauty and meaning of sexuality, it also reinforces the idea that the body is not for indulgence, but for love, for sacrifice, and for divine purpose. The male seed, in this view, is not merely physical substance. It is symbolic of man's creative power, responsibility, and spiritual calling. To throw it away aimlessly is to act against a divine order. To retain it, or to release it only within a covenant of life-giving love, i.e. marriage, is to act in harmony with heaven. For those not called to marriage, retention becomes a sacred offering. It becomes a way of saying, I choose not to plant my seed in the earth, but to let it rise as incense to heaven. The Catholic understanding holds that nothing is wasted in God's economy. What is given up in the flesh is returned tenfold in the spirit. The battle for sexual purity, including semen retention, is not fought with willpower alone. The Catholic path is clear. Man needs grace. The sacraments, especially confession and the Eucharist, provide the strength to endure. Prayer, fasting, and community all become supports on this difficult path. The Church Fathers recognize the relentlessness of temptation. St. Augustine famously wrote of his own struggles with lust, crying out, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. His transformation came only through surrender to Christ. Semen retention, then, is not about pride in one's strength, but humility in one's dependence on God. It is an acknowledgement that we are weak without grace. But with grace, what seems impossible, lifelong purity, becomes not only possible, but glorious. What does a man gain by retaining his seed, by renouncing this worldly pleasure? He gains clarity of mind. He gains vitality. He walks with greater purpose. His eyes are purer, his thoughts less scattered. He is less reactive, more grounded. His presence carries weight, not because of ego, but because of inner coherence. He becomes a man of integrity, a man not ruled by urges, but led by vision. Spiritually, the man who practices semen retention becomes more attuned to divine realities. His prayers deepen. His meditations sharpen. His dreams become vivid. He walks in communion with the Holy Spirit because his body is not leaking sacred energy. It is holding it, consecrating it, offering it. In Catholic tradition, this is called interior liberty, freedom from the slavery of sin. It is a condition of being truly alive. Though semen retention is naturally a male endeavor, the Church's understanding of purity is not gendered. Virgin martyrs, young women who died rather than compromise their chastity, are exalted as saints. Saints like Agnes, Lucy, and Cecilia stand as powerful witnesses that purity is strength. These women, like celibate men, refused to give their bodies to worldly lust. Their reward was not only sainthood, but eternal impact in their witness. We see the same power at work, the refusal to surrender the sacred to profane. Their lives prove that renunciation is not repression. It is radiant resistance. It is saying, I belong to God and I will not be used. In an age where instant gratification is the norm, the Catholic call to renunciation, especially semen retention, is more countercultural than ever, but it is also more necessary than ever. Pornography, hookup culture, and casual sex have diluted the sacredness of sexuality. Men are taught that release is a right, not a responsibility. The result is a generation weakened, physically, emotionally, spiritually, lost purpose, broken relationships, hollow eyes. But a new wave is rising. Men are waking up. Many, even outside the Church, are discovering the power of semen retention. They are testifying to increased confidence, energy, focus, and peace. And those who approach it through the lens of Catholic faith find even more transformation. This is not a call to monkhood for all, but it is a call to reverence, to responsibility, to stop squandering what is sacred, to live not from the loins, but from the heart, and ultimately from the spirit. Power in renunciation. Catholic renunciation is not about loss. It is about divine exchange. You give up what is base, and you receive what is eternal. You let go of the fleeting thrill, and you gain the everlasting flame. Semen retention in this context is not a mere discipline. It is a form of worship. It says, Lord, I trust your design. I trust your timing. I trust that what I withhold now will be repaid in ways I cannot yet imagine. In renouncing the world, a man gains a kingdom. In retaining his seed, he receives the Spirit. In walking the narrow path of chastity, he becomes a temple of light. As Christ said, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 5, verse 8. So, too, blessed are those who retain the sacred within, who hold their seed not with fear but with reverence, and offer their very bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God.